there. My presentation is on revolutionizing education, the works of Johann Pestalozzi. He was born in 1747 in Zurich, Switzerland. He was born to a Protestant family. His paternal grandfather was a minister who worked with the indigent. Pestalozzi was able to observe this, and this made a lasting impact on him. His father died when he was just 5, so he was raised by his mother and her servant. He was shy, socially awkward, and some writings indicate he may have had learning challenges, at least when he was very young. He was able to go to college. He was profoundly impacted by the works of Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He was married to an older woman, Anna, after college. She had some financial resources he did not have. They established Neuhof in 1774, which was a farm which they used for educational purposes. They included vocational agricultural learning as well as a general learning. And so the population was mainly indigent children, some orphans, and they did not charge tuition, but rather they hoped that the agriculture and any crafts that the kids made while they were at the farm would be able to support the operations of the farm. This did not work very well, and it closed 5 years later. So he was then appointed to lead an orphanage of about 80 children who were orphaned by the French Revolution. This taught him a lot about learning how to teach traumatized children. It taught him about relationship development, how important it is for teachers and students to have a really solid, trusting relationship. He learned about meeting the physical, emotional, material needs of students, which of course relates us to Maslow in the future. He also paid attention to the educational environment. He wanted to create a home-like atmosphere. However, this was closed by the presence of armed forces once again. So his philosophy, he believed education is the redeeming force of a civilized society. He clearly believed in naturalism. He felt that the mother was the primary teacher, and she was responsible for education and the protection of values. He had theories that went into child development. He was vested in vocational education, and he believed school should be the education should be the unified effort of family, school, and the community. His practices included developmental learning, sensory learning, object lessons, field trips, grouping by developmental level, or acquisition of skills rather than all the kids in one big room learning the same thing at the same time, math manipulatives, and a focus on the classroom environment. Teacher preparation was very important to Pestalozzi. He obviously wanted teachers to have a thorough knowledge of their content area, but they also had to have emotional stability, especially when working with those populations. They had to have a knowledge of a variety of pedagogies. They had to be excited about learning, which of course rubs off on the children, and they had to actually enjoy the presence of children. The diversity, really, he worked with the underrepresented populations of destitute children and orphans. He was interested in vocational and agricultural education primarily as a means to provide options for students if they weren't able or didn't want to continue with academic studies in the future. And he also believed in behavior modification rather than corporal punishment, particularly for children who had endured trauma. The positive analysis of Pestalozzi, his work spread across 3 continents. Schools were established with using his methods. He influenced many philosophers, including but not limited to Froebel, Mann, Maslow, Montessori, and he impacted other disciplines such as psychology and social work. The negative, he did have financial struggles that plagued him throughout his entire career. He had difficulty with school organization and administration, which led to basically the downfall of all the schools he worked in. And his worst disappointment was the denial of the adoption of his methods by the Swiss government. He wanted everyone to use his methods, particularly in his homeland, and they deemed that to be inappropriate. Those works exemplify Psalm 83 verses 3 and 4. He generally rejected the biblical worldview. He did, however, have a theistic worldview. The implications of his works are seen in contemporary practices such as partners in education, object lessons, field trips, math manipulatives, developmentally appropriate curriculum, developmental grouping, sensory-based learning, and perhaps the most important to me is trauma-informed classrooms.